Hey, Kevin Lawrence here, having a chat with the CEO about adventures in growth and in mental health. I'm here today with Michael Welland, who's built a great company over 17 years and had a bit of an adventure after 17 years that we'll share today. And, Michael, I want to really thank you for being here with us today to share your story. We all love to share the stories of our victories and the amazing things that happen. And then truthfully, the learning often comes from the more challenging times when when life is harder and business is harder. So again, thank you for being here and sharing today, Michael. I appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So Michael, tell us a bit about yourself, the business, a little bit about what you built over was about 17 years and kind of where you're from. Just a little, kind of get to know a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I'm a born and raised BC boy. I've traveled around the world a little bit in my earlier years, but stayed pretty close to home. Live in Kelowna now. On the personal side,
actually, for people that don't know Kelowna, that aren't in BC, Kelowna is like a small town about 4 hours outside Vancouver, Canada, inland, and it's an amazing resort community where everyone wants to be in the summer. Yeah.
I explain it like this: it's basically the best city in the world.
Yeah, that's put it simply. That's it.
yeah. Like I'm a little bit biased, but I sell it pretty strongly. But
it's a darn good spot.
Great place to live. Yeah. But yeah, on the personal side, I've been married now for 19 years this June. Crazy how time flies. To my wife, Yana. That was by far and away the best decision I've ever made in my life. And for a variety of reasons we'll probably touch on through the conversation. 3 kids. My son Noah's 15, Maya's 13, and Damien's 12. We adopted Damien about 7 years ago now. So that's been a cool journey to be a part of. In terms of like hobbies and things I love to do outside of like career and work, I love creating, which kind of feeds into my work, but I love music. Play a lot of piano, learning the guitar slowly, and pretty much any sport. I'm average at a variety of sports, but I love almost every sport except cricket. Cricket is sort of probably low, and rugby. I'm not a big rugby and cricket fan, but every other sport is good.
Awesome.
And on sort of my career journey, I would say I'm really sort of an entrepreneur by trade and sort of by my wiring. I spent about 17 years as an entrepreneur, 11 of which was running my fintech Refresh, and sort of grew and scaled that. And we'll talk a bit about that journey today. But sold that a couple of years ago, and now I've been consulting for some other companies around the world. Really enjoying that, and then started up an e-com business because I needed something to start again. So that's been a fun kind of creative side project for me. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome. And Michael, so Michael and I were in a similar circle of friends of a bunch of entrepreneurs where even if those of us that don't live up in that Kelowna area, a lot of us go up there to go and hang out and play in the summer because it's amazing in the summer. It's also great in the winter too. Myself, like I go up with some mutual friends and go snow biking in the winter up there, and we hang out at the lake or the racetrack or whatever, all the other activities up there in the summer. It's a great spot. So anyway, Michael and I met through some mutual friends when we wrote surfing on Okanagan Lake back. We're saying it's back in 2019, and just having a great time. I remember that because we had a great time, and I remember because I'm a like you, I like a lot of sports, and I'm generally decent at most. And and surfing was what we're doing, lake surfing, and I'm decent at it, decent recreational level. And I remember because I'm helping some of these other guys who are learning and showing them how to get up and how to do it and teaching them, and then I go to surf and I couldn't do it. And I don't. It was one of the very embarrassing moment because I'm pretty good. I'm not expert, but I was helping these people and I was good at helping them. But it was like, but then I went to go myself and it just didn't work that day.
Well, it's probably either the boat or the driver, right?
Yeah, I would blame the driver and Michael guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was interesting that at some point you reach out to me and said, hey, you want to get some help? You're going through a challenging time with your business, and we started having a conversation about that, which we'll get to in a minute. And in that conversation, as I was talking with you, we're having a conversation, like you were going through a really, really rough time, and at some point I became concerned about your well-being and your mental health as you were just explaining the layers of challenges. Can you just give a little bit of context of how at that point in your journey, 17 years in, it started to get really rough?
Yeah, so I think that the backstory to it was it was sort of a slow burnout, and I'm not an expert at studying burnouts, but it was creeping up sort of slowly behind the scenes over time. Kind of hit a challenging period of about 5 years or so in the business, where there were, as any sort of business goes through that's trying to sort of grow and scale, there's a variety of complexities and challenges. But I would say that the challenges seem to gain momentum and complexity through that 5 year period. And then COVID also happened, which added a whole nother layer, across the spectrum in terms of complexity of challenges. So I don't want to sort of discount that.
Mm-hmm.
But I was, at the stage of, potentially losing the company. And I think that what made this sort of challenge quite a bit different, I had attached some personal guarantees to some debt that we had in the company. And I think the layer, it wasn't just a transaction, that personal guarantee. The layer of complexity there was that it was, the guarantee was made to some really close family friends of my wife and I's. And so suddenly, as the business was going through these challenges, I couldn't contain the challenges into the business. They were sort of erupting and overflowing into literally the home and sort of the personal guarantees attached there, and even our relationships with our friends at the time, et cetera, et cetera. And so, it spilled over into my personal life, and I saw it taking its toll on my wife and in the home at a level that I had never experienced before, because I had done a really good job, and this isn't me bragging at all, of separating sort of the business from home as much as possible, and containing any sort of challenges as much as possible, between sort of my home life and the business. So I had gotten really, really good at that, but now it came to a level that, as much as I wanted to put my best foot forward and pretend like things would be okay, it just sort of erupted into, a heightened sense of just real adversity, personally and professionally. And so that was the.
So to kind of clarify that, what you're saying is that normally when we have work challenges, we can leave them at work, compartmentalize, but because of debt that was, money that was borrowed through sort of family relationships, that even though there was a problem at work, which we all face, it was also creating tension at home as well. That same problem, you couldn't kind of keep a wall up between it.
Yeah, exactly. So the challenge around sort of losing the company was creating, anxiousness and challenges with that personal guarantee that then, just created a whole nother layer of challenges for my wife that she had never faced before and I had never faced before. And it was hitting really, really close to home. Like, it was hitting literally our home. So So that was kind of the backstory.
So, from there, what happened from there? Like, obviously that's a lot of stress and pressure, which, we were discussing when that's why I was like, wow, that's a lot. So what happened from there?
Yeah, I would say I would describe that period as, really hazy. Uh, it was like I was operating as a robot during that period. I was a bit of a shell going through the motions that I had to go through to maintain existence and get the things done in the business that I needed to not lose it and, help it sort of transition and sell. My social life was non-existent. COVID obviously played a factor to that. And I started, it was the summer of 2020, maybe the spring. And I started really being challenged with, some really, really dark thoughts, not just negative thoughts, but dark thoughts. And I think the backstory to that was that I had always been a very positive person, and that's, that sounds like a bit of a generic term, but what I mean by that is I had always sort of told myself, and it's one of the strengths of, I think, a leader and an entrepreneur is, you're putting your best foot forward, glass half empty, or sorry, glass half full.
That's full. Yeah. Full. It sounds like it might have shifted to empty.
It might have shifted. It was going down.
Yeah.
But you tell yourself these narratives, like, put your head down and work harder, get it done.
Yep.
Know the way, have it all together. All of those kind of narratives were a really big factor for me. That again, I recognize as, a strength, and but it had an Achilles heel for me. And
it was different this time. Those things stopped working.
It was different. It was for sure different this time. And I would say those things had worked for me in the past, but I hadn't, sort of alongside those narratives working, I hadn't properly trained my mental muscles, my physical, my emotional muscles to differentiate the difference between like hope and lies. Because the narrative I had told myself for years, and this is going back to my childhood, like,
yeah, I
come from a German background, very stoic. People always tell me I'm, very calm and contained, and, I appear to have it all together on the outside. And so part of that is just the way I'm wired and a bit of my upbringing, and we don't show our emotion, right? And so I just kept telling me that myself, that narrative subconsciously, like, yeah. And all the while I wasn't creating an environment for me to recognize that, a mental health crisis could ever happen to me. And that was one of the beliefs that I also had, was that it's never going to happen to me because I've got this. I know the solution.
I'm strong. I understand all this stuff. I've pushed through in the past. I'll push through again.
Yeah. And there's no history of mental health challenges, in my family. I honestly, up until this challenge, I probably could count the number of people on one hand that I knew had gone through a mental health crisis. And so I knew that it was, a challenge for some, but I didn't respect that it could ever happen to me. And so I wasn't mindful enough to start to sort of build a I guess a plan or
mm-hmm.
The environment.
You weren't prepared for it because you didn't expect it, because that was what happened to other people.
Yeah.
Which is what that's why it shocks the crap out of a lot of people, because we're strong and resilient and determined. Yeah. And we always just push through.
Yeah.
And then until that doesn't work, and it's shocking and uncomfortable.
And and again, like I said, like no mental health crisis in the family. I have still to this day an amazing wife. She supports me unconditionally. Like I had the support structures on paper.
Yeah,
Like
on
I had a
paper,
business.
it shouldn't gotten that bad.
No, I
Yeah,
had the business coaches. I had the groups and the forum groups and the CEO
right.
groups. I had friends, but I didn't let them in, to my true self and true challenges for a variety of reasons. And that's, again, it's self-induced, but uh, so that was a
Mhm.
bit of sort of the belief systems
Got you there. So
I've learned
how?
now after the fact um, that were playing into to
Yeah,
that story. And so you fast forward into the challenges in the business and in 2020, and um, exponentially, darker and darker thoughts. And um, I still get sort of chills describing it, but I remember starting down this lie of telling myself, because I'm a solution oriented thinker, so I'm always trying to think
mm-hmm.
what's the path to the solution. And so the solution for me was actually starting to think about, hey, what if I took myself out of the equation, like permanently, and that could be in fact the best solution. And so those.
Say more about that, Michael. I know that's probably a challenging thing to talk about, but like, what was this thinking you were having?
Well, I quite honestly, I was thinking about taking my own life. And as crazy as that sounds, um, I was running out of solutions. Um,
Right.
at least I thought I was, and I had told myself I was running out of solutions. I was running out of time. Again, all those like hazy thoughts, like not thinking clearly, obviously. Um, and it sort of started to compound where, you know, I I had actually attempted to take my own life in
You did.
September
Yeah.
of 2020. And so um, thankfully uh, it it was unsuccessful,
Thankfully.
but uh, that's how bad it got. And by the grace of God, I'm still here today, and uh, I never want to go through that anymore. And even though challenges and adversity will come, but again, I never in a million years would have ever thought that it would happen to me. Um,
So, Michael, and thank you. I really appreciate you being open and sharing this, because this is important, because it can happen to any of us. And
yeah,
we all are wired similarly in senior leadership and entrepreneurs, where we have the same experience, wiring. Like, it's almost the going gets tough, the tough gets going. So,
yeah.
could you put to other people to understand, how can a smart, successful, driven guy like yourself get to the point of believing that taking their life and ending their time on the planet early, like, in retrospect, what was it about that made that seem like the solution? Like, what was the?
Um, that's still a tough question to answer, because I wasn't thinking straight. But I think
No,
the
you were in the red zone on mental health, and
yeah,
cognitively you're not working with it all. And we don't make. I've been in a very. I haven't been in the same place as you, but I've been in that red zone. We do not make good choices,
yeah.
because we're lose faith, and a whole bunch of stuff is going on that it's. But your best guess on having other people to understand that, because you're a smart, capable guy who got into a really bad place.
Yeah. Sorry, do you mind repeating the question?
Of course. And again, it did. And again, I'm deeply grateful for you sharing these things. How does one of us get to the point where taking their life is a viable option in their mind. Although with perspective, we know that's not the case, but in that moment.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, you have the moment, but then you have the moments leading up to the moment, and I think that, for me in that moment, like I said, the walls are closing in. You feel, I don't think I've ever felt so alone in my life, as that moment. And yeah, it's incredibly lonely. But you feel like there's no other solution. You're out of options, and that comes out of the loneliness. That comes out of the lack of support structures in place that you can process out loud and speak to others maybe that have gone through, a situation in the past. But I think leading up to that, like I said, quite honestly, I hadn't, and I think about mental health now, obviously very differently, and with the utmost sort of respect that happened to anybody. But I think, I think of it almost like, fitness, because I think mental health, it's like, yeah, everyone wants to be healthy, but how do you actually get there? And to me, it's a bit more like, fitness. Like we go to the gym and we create a physical fitness plan, eating right, working out, taking time off for self, and all of those things. What are the drivers that lead to mental fitness? Like, what is my mental fitness plan? And I had none of that.
You hadn't needed it.
I hadn't needed it. And well, I don't know if that's true. I think I had told myself I didn't need it.
Yeah, well said. Well said. You hadn't felt the need for it.
Yeah,
Yes.
There's probably, like I said, a number of sort of events in that 5-year period where I could have been sort of building that mental fitness in a lot more healthier way.
That makes sense. So if we go down to the lows of lows in September of 2020, like that's as low as it can get, and thankfully, thankfully your planning wasn't that good in that event, so it didn't. So how did you go from the walls closing in, the pressure, and I've heard other people say that it feels like there's a vice on your brain and it's just tightening up and tightening up and tightening up, like your brain is going to explode, and you lose faith that it can be undone, like there's no out, like the walls closing in metaphor is similar, and and without hope and alone, then so I've heard other people share similar. How did you go from there to like climbing out, and obviously you got some help, and how did that come to be?
Yeah, so we've chatted about a little bit about this before. I think the process for me was a little bit different, in that as strange and messed and twisted as this sounds, I actually didn't realize that I had a problem. And I actually called you. It was that same summer. I think it was like August or of that same summer. And I actually called you to consult for the business and help the business navigate through the crisis. Because to me, again, and this is my solution-oriented thinking, I thought, hey, if I can solve the business, everything else sort of follows on, which wasn't wrong. It was just that, and
you were focused on the business versus yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I wasn't sort of even then admitting I came to you for help, but not for me. It was indirectly for me, but it was for the business. And so um, you in your wisdom sort of recognized as we were having that conversation, uh, you asked me point blank, are you okay? Like you yourself, like forget the business, put it on the side. Like mentally, are you okay? Are you having these thoughts about taking your own life? Are you, are you having a challenge? And nobody, it sort of, I remember that moment. I remember where I was standing, um, and it hit me like a ton of bricks because nobody had asked me that before, and nobody had recognized, or been able to recognize that for the stoicism that I was
Mm-hmm.
showing at the time. And so that's kind of how I would say the process to healing really started, was from that first conversation. And you know uh, you you didn't consult for the business, but you said, hey, I'm gonna call you once a week. And I think we did that for about 4 months or so. Once a week, I think it
Yep.
was Thursdays at 2 p.m., just to check in, see how your week is going, see how you're doing. um, and it was a short call, but that was really the 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 turning point. And it wasn't like a
No,
U-turn.
it wasn't a snap your fingers and you're good.
Yeah, yeah,
So that would explain why you went from alone to now you had someone with you on the journey,
yeah,
and someone just opened up a door. I mean, and I'm grateful to have been down this road with others and have training on it. So I asked, and I'm grateful I did have the courage to ask, because that's not a fun thing to ask another person, another human being. So at that point, it opened up some possibilities, started on this journey. So, like, what are the things from that point that helped you to heal and get back on track? Like, I'm sure you tried lots of different things. What are the things that made a difference?
yeah. I mean, there's so many. Uh, Definitely, having that connection with somebody else who I'd say was unbiased to the situation. Like, Kevin was calling me just for me,
Yeah.
every week. There wasn't, an invoice he was trying to collect. There wasn't a paycheck he was trying to earn. There was no implications as to whether I told him, hey, Kevin, don't call, like, go away, or thank you, or anything. I could have given you any response.
Yep.
And so having someone like that, obviously in your corner, um, who is unbiased to the situation and will just hear you for you, regardless of what you're saying, is, I'd say, vitally important. And so that leads into the second point, and you recommended this as well. You weren't trying to be a counselor to me,
Mm-mm.
but you said get professional help, and I did that, and that was fantastic. Um, and I'd say what helped me is I got somebody that I'd done some work with before, sort of unrelated. It was more relational work, but I already trusted him, and I knew that sort of he had experience in this area in particular. And so, because there's a lot of people that you can go to, and so it allowed me to really spend, an hour, 2 hours a week processing my thoughts out loud, which was, and I didn't even appreciate it fully at the time, but it was more healing than I can say and explain. But
What was more
um,
healing? The
just the process of being able to process my thoughts out loud, and what I was struggling with, and where I was going, rather than it just internalizing. Because I think for years, thoughts had sort of swarmed in my mind, and I just kept them contained.
Yeah. So starting to unpack that with someone that was yeah, which a
Yeah,
great counselor or psychologist does.
exactly. And the flip side of that, what didn't work was just talking to anybody. about my situation. And that wasn't always, didn't always have a good outcome. And
Say
not that
more
I
about
was,
that, because people around you want to help, but they're generally useless. And so you got to go to the expert. That's how you say the metaphor. Like if you got a compound fracture, your friends can't fix it. And when your
exactly.
brain is broken like that for a period, you need. So tell me more about the people around you and why that wasn't helpful.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, again, like you said, great example, they wanted to help, but
Mm-hmm.
their their advice was more similar to my advice I was telling myself, was like, oh, you need to like you know uh do this and this and this, like and get the get the business and solve that. And like it was more, and I'm so guilty of that, like
We
even
all are.
my wife and I's relationship, like I'll go to solution, hey, you need to do this and this to get this situation rectified. And we do that often. And so it wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't inherently wrong. It was just not helpful, to this situation. It was like, here I had a broken leg, to use your example, and people were telling me, oh, you just need to walk on it more and it'll go away,
Yeah.
kind of thing, right? Like,
There's a distinction there, Michael, between solution and hearing and getting people. And what good counselors do is they hear and get you, and they have tools and frameworks to help you to move ahead.
yeah,
And by nature, we go to solutions so quickly.
yeah,
And because our intent is we want to help them get out of pain, but it's yeah,
yeah,
like it's like telling them just go walk on it and it'll heal up in time. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then I think the other sort of response was an awkward response, because people hadn't sort of been through that situation, before, um, and couldn't help. And so it was like, well, what do I do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think another thing that really did help, and you did this as well, is you introduced me to some people that had gone through the experience before. Again, not to counsel me, but in a sense, counsel me based on their own experience. And that, I'd say, combined with the professional help and the support structure, was just, so helpful, because it 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 immediately it made me appreciate that I'm not alone. Someone else that has run a company, that's been a leader, and started their company and had it for a number of years, they went through similar adversity that struck them to the core, and here's what they did, and they got on the other side of it. And so I'm thinking of the person that I talked to, and they probably don't even realize it was a short 30-minute conversation, but the value of that 30-minute conversation was so life-giving to me. And I'll be forever, I've never met the person face to face, actually, but I'll
Oh,
be
come on.
forever indebted.
You Oh, well, I would hope that you do one day.
Yeah, totally.
So and again, thankfully or not thankfully, whatever it is, fortunately or unfortunately, this is not the first time I've been down this road with another senior person, right? And that's why I was able to connect you with someone. So aside from seeing someone like you that's been through this journey and come out the other side, what what did you take from speaking with that person?
I took, um, over and above what I've described, like I took, the benefit of not feeling alone, that there was someone
Mm-hmm.
else that had gone before me. But in terms of like just practical, pragmatic advice, in terms of what habits they had instituted, mental fitness habits, um, the one big takeaway that I still do to this day, um, is, he said, you, as hard as it is, your mind, is on a, is feeding itself, a soundtrack right now, a narrative that is false, and you actually have to and only you can do this, but you need to rewire your mind. And he said the way to do that, in some part, was the moment that you wake up, you find one thing that you're grateful for. And yeah, he described, and I can relate to it. Some mornings you wake up and it's like the one thing you can describe is so utterly simplistic that you would think, okay, you're grateful for, a soft pillow under your head when you're sleeping. Like we're talking like very basic,
simple, right?
Yeah. But you grind through that, and you start to kind of re-look at and reframe your perspective on the world around you to again appreciate what you have instead of focusing on what you don't have, because the reality is that there's a lot of things that you don't have in that moment, but you do have something or some things, and you name those things, and you utter gratefulness for them. And so I do it. It's the 5-minute journal every day. So that's a habit. I'm not perfect with it every day, but that's a habit I still do today. That just is a special time of just naming simple and complex things that you're grateful for.
Yeah.
So that was probably the biggest.
I remember you telling me that after that conversation. And it's interesting. I practice gratitude a lot. And I do that. And I think I might have even done it more after you told me that story of how impactful that thing, that technique was for you.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, the glass is either half full or half empty. And when we get in a bad mental state, like the red zone of mental health, we just start seeing the half empty.
Yeah.
And it's self-fulfilling, and it takes you down a bad place.
Yeah.
And really all you're doing is forcing yourself to see the half full.
Yeah.
So if you could, we got a few more minutes here, but I'd like to so in terms of your mental fitness, and I really like how you put that. So what are your mental fitness things that you do today to stay in a good place? Having been to what you thought was a good place, getting knocked down and now climbing back up, ideally, stronger and more aware, which you obviously are.
Yeah.
What are your mental fitness routines or things that you do now? So you talked about the 5-minute journal and gratitude.
Yeah. So I do that. I'd say another sort of important piece is a trusted community around me, which sounds very vague, but so I'm part of a guys group. We meet every 2 weeks, just 5 of us. Unfortunately, usually on Zoom. Some have moved away out of the area. But that group has been some guys I've known for many years, and other guys I've known only for the last kind of couple of years. But that group again has almost been I guess a version of the counseling, and this like somewhere in between sort of your support and reaching out every week to say, hey, how are you doing? And it's a safe space where you can
Is this new? Is this group new?
No, we've been meeting now for about 2 years.
Okay, but since you went through this, you started this because you were in a CEO forum. You're in a CEO forum before.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it's a different environment with a different agenda.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not there are CEOs in the group, and there's entrepreneurs and business leaders. I'd say everyone in the group it fits one of those sort of boxes, but it's not from the perspective of how's the business doing and how can we help. It's just sharing thoughts on life.
You enter the door through how are you doing versus the business which the CEO forums generally enter the door through.
Yeah. And we do a check-in. We go around the group, and it usually takes an hour and a half. We do how are you doing personally, professionally, and spiritually? And I think those 3 aspects of our lives intersect. And on the spiritual front, I would say the other practice that I do, some call it meditating, others call it prayer. I've done a lot of prayer and meditating. But that process of just silence in the morning has been really, really important to me. And it's actually probably one of the highlights of the day. And without that, I don't have a great day typically, or it's a more challenging sort of mental day, because I'm not starting off from a perspective of, gratitude and of service,
Mm-hmm.
and thinking less about myself. And so that practice has been instrumental as well. And I think the third one, I would say, this isn't, planned out necessarily, but over time, being on the other side of this, I have become a bit more accustomed to situations and environments or adversity that might sort of trigger me and certain behaviors in terms of my mental wellness. And I'm still learning that. So it's not a practice or anything like that, but I've become more aware, I guess, of what are some of those situations, and acknowledging when I'm not, whether it's in this guys group or with my wife, when I'm not doing okay, and starting to unpack even why is that, like what's going on around me or within me that is maybe triggering that, and not avoiding it, acknowledging that it's there, but learning to sort of limit those instances when you walk into a triggering event, is kind of the other aspect, I think, that
kind of like awareness of it, of the drivers, and prevention.
Yeah.
Like if it's because you stand on your head and drink a glass of water, then you probably stop standing on your head when you drink water.
Yeah, exactly.
And being, yeah, that awareness is, and understanding what's going on, that drives it. It's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So 2 more questions, then we'll wrap, Michael. So how has you talked before about your belief system, and you had beliefs that, mental health is other people, and I will always just push through and be fine. I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially that, So how have your beliefs changed through all of this?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I think it's, in a lot of ways, it's the inverse of a lot of those beliefs that I mentioned. I think that it can happen to me. I hope it doesn't happen to that extent ever again. But I respect the fact that it can happen to me. And I would say, if there's sort of one belief system, it's tough to train yourself. I haven't been through it because, hindsight is always 20/20.
Of course, yeah.
If I were telling my younger self, I would say respect the fact that it can happen to you, and never diminish that. And I hadn't done that. And so I think for those maybe listening that are telling themselves that, because society tells us that, right? Is like,
yes.
Stand up, like do it better, work harder, work smarter. Like
the people that have mental health issues are weak. There's something wrong with them. I'm not like them. I'm strong. I'm smarter. I'm more resilient. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But everybody has a breaking point.
Yeah. And, well said.
And not that you sort of look to find that breaking point, but if you were to sort of play out your current situation, your current environment, what would that breaking point look like, and how would you prepare yourself, for that? I think, had I done that, maybe, not saying that would have been easy, but you can't sort of relive the past, but I think.
Well, what would you have done to prepare? Because you don't know what's going to be the breaking point. We don't know. We don't, but what would you do if you could go back in time and be more prepared, or prepare differently? How would you prepare for that?
Well, quite honestly, I would have done all the things that I just mentioned that I'm doing now to start with. And I probably would have been a lot more mature even in those learnings, that I just described, because I've been doing them sort of over a longer period of time, and they would have sort of gained much more sort of compounding value, if you will. But that's probably where I would have started. But having said that, life life does throw you punches, and you can't you can't say, well, I'm going to live this perfect straight line
Oh,
if I do these things at a young age. Like, it's not about the straight line, but it is about sort of being your best self. And like, it's when it comes to mental health, you're not your best self, and that can sort of go a layer deeper into taking yourself, which is never the solution. And so, yeah, I don't know if that sort of makes sense, but I
it
think,
does. And let me try this as I'm listening to you, and for many others I've talked about, in conversations around this. The thing that people say, and the thing that I feel comfortable in my own life with, is that I've got people that when I'm feeling I'm in a bad place, and I'm also feeling almost shameful or embarrassed, because we're performers, we don't like to admit when things aren't good. I've got a couple people that I always know I can call outside of my family and friend environment to tap into.
yeah,
I got a guy in San Diego, and I got a woman in Atlanta, who are both key relationships I've known for years, and I can tell them anything. And I also have a counselor locally. So like, but sometimes stuff happens and it's messy and it's dirty and it's embarrassing and all kinds of, there's shame and guilt and all this other crap mixed in. You don't want to go talk to your best friend, probably. And you may not want to go talk to your spouse, understandably. But having a muscle and habit and
yeah,
people that you can do that with early
yeah,
is, because the stuff's going to happen. And listening to your story, even hearing more about it today,
yeah.
that wasn't part of your operating system yet.
No, no,
And it is today.
it is today. Yeah, yeah. And you raise a good point. Like, I'd recommend, and I have this person still that I worked with few years ago now, but a professional person that, when things are trending downwards at all, you can call and get some time and write the course. But even
Yes.
before it sort of goes
Yeah.
down,
Build the relationship before the crisis.
yeah, yeah, 100%.
So, Michael, again, deep, deep gratitude for you sharing this, because this is a journey hundreds and thousands of leaders and CEOs and entrepreneurs go through. And we just don't talk about it publicly, which is also why I like to share these things. Because once people realize that it's very, very normal, they might be more likely to be prepared or get help earlier versus, waiting for a potentially catastrophic event to get that help. So, sharing of this story is another way to help, which I really appreciate you being able to do and to share. So any final thoughts that you would share with anyone that's listening to this that you would kind of thought you would leave people with?
Yeah, I would just say you are not alone. That's the one phrase that, maybe there's somebody listening today that, feels alone. But for them to know that they're not alone, that there is somebody that's gone through, a similar crisis in the past. And, yeah, just those words, at least for me, mentally, and just hearing them, and experiencing that through, community groups and your tribe and your professional, assistants. Yeah, just those words, I think, is healing in and of itself.
Yeah, well said. And a reminder to everyone that's watching and listening: mental health hotline. If you're in those moments of crisis, just type in mental health hotline in any search engine. It'll give you a number you can call immediately. Speak to a stranger immediately who can guide you until you can get the appropriate professional help. Obviously, psychologist, doctor, counselor, go to emergency. But in those moments of crisis, there's people lined up ready to help us. We just need to, have that courage to reach out and get help and ask somebody.
Yeah.
Awesome. Michael,
yeah.
You're an amazing man, and I really appreciate you sharing this. And I'm honored that you're willing to help other people learn from your painful experience that turned out great in the end.
Well, I appreciate you, Kevin, and obviously for all of the help that you've given to me over the years, but also for just raising awareness for this topic, because I think that I never talked about it and respected it enough. But I applaud you for raising awareness and helping start the conversation. So appreciate it.
Yep, you're very welcome. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin.